Most people don't lose respect in loud, obvious ways. They lose it in whispers, in habits so small, so automatic, they don't even notice it slipping away. You might think you're being polite, thoughtful, sociable, but what if those very behaviors are quietly draining your power? This video reveals 8 subtle behaviors that destroy respect without you even realizing. These aren't dramatic mistakes. They're the daily leaks of dignity, presence, and quiet influence, inspired by the ruthless clarity of Machiavelli and the calm strength of Stoic philosophy. We'll expose the behaviors that signal weakness without a word, and more importantly, we'll show you how to correct them, with silence, with stillness, with precision. So if you've ever felt like people overlook you, talk over you, or dismiss you without reason, this is why. Respect isn't lost all at once. It's leaked slowly through habits you were never taught to question. If you're ready to reclaim your presence and stop bleeding influence, stay with me and make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because your silence should speak power, not permission.
Number 1.
Talking about plans, not executing them. There's a subtle erosion of respect that happens every time you speak more than you act. Each time you talk about your next big move, your dream project, or your bold ambition without delivering visible results, you send an unspoken signal. My words are cheaper than my actions. And over time, people begin to treat you accordingly, not with hatred, not even with criticism, but with indifference. The Stoics warned us against this. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." To the Stoic mind, words are not inherently valuable. They are only as valuable as the discipline behind them. If your speech is not anchored in real, consistent effort, then it's not communication, it's leakage. You're not inspiring trust, you're borrowing it temporarily on the promise of repayment that never arrives. This kind of behavior doesn't just damage how others see you, it corrodes your inner stability. When you talk too much about what you plan to do, you start confusing intention with identity. You become more in love with the idea of being someone impressive than with actually doing something impressive. And this creates a dangerous illusion that talking about growth is equal to growing. It's not. Why do so many people fall into this trap? It's not because they're dishonest. It's because talking feels like progress. In neuroscience, this is called social reality substitution. When we announce a goal publicly, our brain gives us a dopamine reward, as if we've already taken a meaningful step. But that false reward reduces the urgency to act. Talking tricks us into thinking we've already begun, and so we don't. Now let's consider the cost. When you become known for your ideas but not your follow-through, people begin to listen with polite tolerance, not respect. They may smile when you speak, but they stop believing. Eventually, your words become background noise, soft, forgettable, unanchored. Machiavelli would see this as a fatal flaw in reputation management. In The Prince, he insists that perception must be tightly controlled, but he also warns that image without substance is a liability. A leader, or any person seeking influence, must be feared or respected for a reason. Empty promises are dangerous because once you're seen as unreliable, it's almost impossible to reclaim the image of discipline. Contrast this with Leonardo da Vinci. Despite being one of history's most prolific minds, he rarely spoke about what he was working on. His notebooks were private, his experiments were silent. He only revealed what he had built when it was already undeniable. And that's why his mystique lasted for centuries, because his silence was not absence, it was a signal of depth. To shift this pattern, adopt what I call the silent builder mindset. Speak less, execute more. Let your progress create curiosity. Let your results do the talking. If you must speak about your goals, do so after you've begun. Let it be a report, not a pitch. A reflection, not a rehearsal. Seneca put it best. The best indication of a well-ordered mind is a man's ability to remain in one place and linger in his own company. That lingering includes working in silence, resisting the temptation to seek validation before the work is ready. Your power is not in being believed, it's in being undeniable. When you stop broadcasting what you're going to do and start showing what is already in motion, people don't just respect you more. They listen harder because your silence, backed by visible results, becomes the loudest thing in the room.
Number 2.
Over-explaining yourself. There is a moment in every conversation where silence would have been stronger than justification, but many people, out of fear of being misunderstood or judged, pour endless words into explaining their actions. They justify their tone, over-clarify their boundaries, and seek approval for decisions that needed none. On the surface, it sounds polite, but underneath, it whispers insecurity. The Stoics saw through this. Epictetus wrote, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why would he say that? Because the moment you feel compelled to explain your every move, you are surrendering your clarity in exchange for comfort. You are no longer living in alignment with reason. You are living in reaction to perception. You're not standing on your choices. You're tiptoeing around other people's expectations. In psychological terms, this is rooted in a concept called external locus of control, a mindset where your worth depends on how others respond. You say something, but if it doesn't land well, you feel compelled to soften, explain, apologize. You make a decision, but if someone questions it, you unravel the logic to win their approval. But true confidence doesn't beg for understanding. It lets the dust settle. It trusts the silence. Now let's look at how this plays out. Imagine someone sets a boundary. They decide to leave a toxic environment or walk away from a draining relationship. But instead of letting that boundary speak for itself, they fill the air with reasons. I'm not trying to be mean. I just need space. I hope you're not upset. And suddenly their clarity turns into noise. Their firmness dissolves into a performance. Or take someone who says no to a project at work. Instead of calmly stating, "That doesn't align with my priorities," they spiral into apologies and backstory. And by the end of it, the no sounds like a maybe. Even worse, some people explain their very identity. They feel pressure to justify their values, their emotional boundaries, even their silence. But the more you try to make others comfortable with who you are, the more you lose sight of that very identity. Machiavelli would caution you, the more you explain, the less power you hold. In The Prince, he taught that strong leaders do not dilute decisions with overjustification. They don't seek consensus before acting. They create results and let the outcome speak. One powerful example of this in modern history is Steve Jobs. Known for his controversial decisions, he often responded to criticism not with arguments, but with execution. He would say little, but deliver much. And because of that, his silence became louder than any justification could have been. It wasn't arrogance, it was focus. To reclaim your strength, you must release the urge to be understood by everyone. You must remember your life is not a courtroom. You do not need to argue your case to people who've already decided not to listen. You owe yourself clarity, and you owe the world action, not over-explanation. Seneca reminds us, a wise man is content with himself. That contentment expresses itself in restraint, in quiet confidence, in holding your position without dressing it up for public acceptance. When you learn to let your choices stand unaccompanied by apology, you begin to embody calm authority. Because every time you over-explain, you teach others that your decisions are negotiable. But when you let your actions speak and let silence hold the rest, you become someone who cannot be rattled. Someone who commands respect without asking for it.
Number 3.
Being too agreeable. At first glance, being agreeable looks like a strength. You're polite, you're flexible, you keep the peace. Conversations flow, and people smile around you. But beneath that pleasant surface, something subtle and dangerous begins to happen. People stop taking you seriously. You become likable, yes, but forgettable, and eventually ignorable. The Stoics never mistook kindness for submission. They never confused character with compliance. Marcus Aurelius warned, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." Agreeableness, when not rooted in principle, becomes a slow erosion of the self. You start nodding at things you don't believe. You start laughing at things that make you uncomfortable, and you start shrinking bit by bit so you don't disrupt the room. Here's what makes this dangerous. People rarely notice when you become too agreeable. They won't call it out. They'll simply start assuming you have no edge, no boundary, no position of your own. And without those things, respect cannot form. People respect clarity, not politeness. They follow presence, not performance. Psychologically, this habit is often rooted in the fear of disconnection. If you say no, you might lose them. If you disagree, you might upset them. But here's what Stoicism teaches. You cannot live free if your peace depends on pleasing others. Epictetus put it clearly. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And what is more outside your control than how others feel about your boundaries? Now let's ground this in something real. Consider Eleanor Roosevelt. She wasn't aggressive, she didn't shout, but she also didn't bend. When criticized for speaking too boldly on human rights, she replied, "Do what you feel in your heart to be right, for you'll be criticized anyway." That is the voice of someone who chose clarity over comfort. She didn't need to argue. Her stillness was her stance. Now compare that with a more common experience. Someone tells a joke you find distasteful. Instead of staying neutral, you laugh nervously, just to keep things smooth. In that moment, you didn't avoid conflict, you avoided authenticity, and that small compromise reinforces a dangerous message, that your truth can be softened for social approval. Machiavelli would call this a mistake of strategy. In The Prince, he wrote that, "A man who seeks to please will end by being despised." That sounds harsh, but it's painfully accurate. Because when you try to be agreeable to everyone, you become invisible to all. People remember clarity even if it's uncomfortable, but no one remembers the person who always nods. The solution isn't arrogance, it's groundedness. A Stoic doesn't reject others for sport, but he doesn't trade his essence for ease either. He speaks less, but what he says is firm. He listens deeply, but when he responds, it carries weight. His approval is earned, not automatic. To reclaim your presence, learn to allow discomfort. Let the silence hang after your no. Let others wrestle with your truth while you remain unmoved. Let your stillness become a filter. Those who respect it will stay. Those who don't were never meant to. Because the one who must always agree has no identity of their own, but the one who can sit with tension, without folding, without rushing to fill the gap, commands a room, not with noise, but with unshakable gravity.
Number 4.
Over-apologizing. At some point, the word sorry stopped being a signal of genuine remorse and became a nervous reflex. People say sorry for speaking, for breathing too loudly, for having needs, for taking up an extra second of time. You hear it constantly. Sorry to interrupt. Sorry if this sounds dumb. Sorry I'm just rambling. But what most don't see is this. Excessive apologizing doesn't create connection. It creates imbalance. It quietly tells others, I am beneath you. The Stoics taught us that speech should be clean, deliberate, and free from unnecessary emotion, Seneca wrote. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor. The person who over-apologizes craves acceptance so much. They offer up their own dignity as the price, but there's a cost to this trade. one that compounds slowly, invisibly. You start to believe your presence needs to be justified, that your voice is a disruption, that your ideas must be softened before they can be heard. Apologizing when it's earned is a sign of maturity, but apologizing for existing is not humility. It's self-erasure. You're telling the world you don't believe you belong, and when you speak that often enough, people start to believe you. This behavior is usually rooted in early conditioning. Somewhere along the way, you learned that staying small was safer, that if you made yourself easy to tolerate, you'd avoid judgment. So you wrapped your truth in apology. But over time, that protection becomes a prison, and the more you apologize for things that don't require it, the more you train your nervous system to feel guilty for simply being. Let's look at how this plays out. Imagine you're starting a presentation. Instead of beginning with presence, you say, "Sorry if this doesn't make sense." That one sentence primes the room to doubt you, even if your delivery is flawless. Or in conversation you say, "Sorry to bother you," before expressing a perfectly reasonable need. Now the dynamic has shifted. You've made yourself the burden and the other person the favor giver. Machiavelli would have called this an unforced loss of power. In The Prince, he warns that when a leader appears unsure, even slightly, people will magnify that uncertainty. And though you may not be ruling a nation, the same principle applies to your reputation. If you signal that your ideas are unworthy, they'll be treated as such. Contrast this with Maya Angelou. She didn't speak loudly, but she spoke with certainty. She did not rush, she did not defend, and she never began a sentence with, "I'm sorry, but..." Her tone alone conveyed that her voice was not an interruption. It was a presence to be felt. She made no apologies for existing, and people leaned in to listen. To reclaim your self-respect, you must become aware of the reflex. Ask yourself, did I harm someone? Did I cross a boundary? Or am I apologizing because I feel uncomfortable being visible? If it's the latter, then it's not an apology. It's a cue to pause. Replace it with a breath. With stillness, with a calm, grounded sentence that needs no disclaimer. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that mastery begins with your language, with the way you name your presence. You don't need to shrink to earn space. You don't need to beg to be heard. You just need to stop asking permission to exist. Because the world hears you differently when you stop apologizing for being here. And that shift, subtle, steady, unspoken, is the beginning of quiet power.
Number 5.
Filling silence nervously. Most people are terrified of silence. They rush to fill it with words, jokes, explanations, over-apologies, anything to avoid the raw discomfort of stillness. But here's what no one tells you. The one who controls the silence controls the room. The one who can sit in the quiet without flinching holds the balance, and the one who fills every gap with noise exposes their fear. The Stoics understood this long before it became a public speaking tactic. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have." Silence is one of those moments. When it enters the room, all your masks fall. You either let it pass through you with composure, or you react. And in reacting, you reveal your dependence on external cues, your craving to be understood, to be approved, to be liked. What's often misunderstood is this. Silence isn't passive, it's powerful. In conversation, silence can create reflection, it can create tension, it can even create respect. But only if you have the courage to let it be. The person who needs to constantly fill the air shows they fear being invisible. The person who can remain still teaches others to wait. Now think about your daily life. You ask a question, and the other person hesitates. You jump in. "Sorry, I meant..." Or, "But if not, that's okay." In doing so, you didn't just interrupt them. you interrupted your own clarity. You didn't give silence the space to reveal their truth. You filled the gap because you were uncomfortable. And that discomfort teaches others something too, that you lack inner ground. But the Stoics taught, only your judgments disturb you. Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. If you view silence as awkward, you will fear it. If you view it as a test, you'll fail it. But if you see it as sacred, a space to hold, to command, to reflect, then it becomes your tool. Let's look at Steve Jobs. He was known for his long pauses, on stage, in interviews, even in one-on-one meetings. But these weren't moments of hesitation. They were moments of control. They signaled, I'm not chasing your reaction. I am pacing this exchange on my terms. And people listened, not just to his words, but to the space between them. Even in the political arena, we see this. Barack Obama often used pauses masterfully. He allowed his words to land. He let moments breathe. And in that stillness, people leaned in. The silence didn't create distance. It created gravity. Machiavelli would have called this silent assertion. In The Prince, he emphasized that control is rarely loud. Real influence comes from those who reveal little and who time their movements with care. Silence is a strategy, not to confuse others, but to anchor yourself. To develop this, stop treating silence as a void to escape. It is not empty, it is a canvas. When you leave it untouched, it reveals your restraint. But when you scramble to fill it, you project weakness. You tell the room you need noise to feel worthy. So next time you speak, try this. Finish your sentence and wait. Don't rush. Let the stillness hang. Let it challenge your ego. Let it test your presence. Let it expose who you are. When there's nothing left to say, because the one who can sit in silence without fear becomes untouchable. And in a world addicted to noise, the one who pauses, not out of nervousness, but out of power, is always the one remembered. Number 6, reacting emotionally to disrespect. When someone disrespects you, your instincts flare. You want to correct them, defend your honor, make them feel the sting of their words. But the moment you react with raw emotion, especially with visible anger, you've already lost something essential. You've handed over your control, because now they know exactly where your buttons are. They know how to access your inner world. The Stoics had a name for this: pathos. The irrational storms of emotion that disrupt reason. Marcus Aurelius warned, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. When you react with emotion to disrespect, you give away that power. You allow the external to dominate the internal. And once someone realizes they can move you, they will. Modern psychology calls this emotional leakage. It's when your body and tone betray your inner insecurity. You might think you're showing strength by firing back, but what you're actually revealing is vulnerability. You're saying without meaning to. This got to me. I needed to respond. I needed to be seen. And people don't respect that. They study it. They remember it. They use it. Now picture how this unfolds in everyday life. Someone makes a cutting remark in public. If you snap back, raise your voice, or throw sarcasm, you might win the moment, but you lose the long game. Because what stays in people's memory is not the insult, but the spectacle of your reaction. You appear emotional, reactive, controlled by your ego. Contrast that with someone who remains calm, who hears the insult, breathes once, and says nothing, or simply replies with a soft, "That's your view." That kind of stillness disarms people. It doesn't show fear, it shows depth. And when people can't find your breaking point, they stop looking. They respect what they can't unravel. Machiavelli would call this strategic unreadability. In The Prince, he emphasizes that rulers must master not only action, but image. You must appear composed even when provoked. Not because you're numb, but because power demands discipline. If others can't read your emotion, they can't manipulate it. But if they see the cracks in your armor, they will widen them. Michelle Obama embodies this. Throughout her time in the spotlight, she was the target of constant disrespect. But she never lowered herself to rage or retaliation. Instead, she embodied what Stoics called apatheia, calm independence from insult. Her famous line, "When they go low, we go high," wasn't just about kindness, it was about power, about not letting other people pull you down into emotional chaos. To practice this, you must redefine what strength looks like. It's not the loudest comeback, it's the quietest refusal to be moved, Epictetus reminds us. Any person capable of angering you becomes your master. Let that sentence burn, because it reveals the price of emotional reactivity. Your freedom. So the next time someone disrespects you, don't reach for a retort. Reach for your stillness. Hold your energy like a closed fist. Say less, stay calm, and let your refusal to react become the sharpest reply of all. Because in a noisy world, the person who remains unprovoked becomes the one others cannot figure out. And what people can't figure out, they respect, not because you've silenced them, but because you've mastered yourself. And in the end, that is the highest form of discipline, to stay composed even when the world tries to pull you apart. Number 7, repeating yourself when ignored. It's one of the most subtle ways people lose respect, and they don't even realize it. You speak, no one responds. And instead of letting your words stand, you repeat yourself. Maybe louder, maybe rephrased, but the message underneath is clear. Please hear me. And just like that, you go from being the speaker to becoming the seeker. The Stoics understood this trap. Epictetus said, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned only these.'" In other words, don't chase validation, don't defend yourself to people who are not listening, and don't repeat yourself to those who are not ready to receive. When you restate what you've already said just because it didn't land, you're sending an unconscious signal. My words only matter if you affirm them. But Stoicism teaches that what's true doesn't need to be repeated. It just needs to be lived. This habit of speaking again and again until you're heard usually comes from a deeper fear, the fear of being invisible. But here's the paradox. The more you chase acknowledgement, the more invisible you become. Because repetition makes your voice sound like background noise. It loses sharpness. It loses command. Let's make this real. You're in a group discussion. You offer a sharp, clear suggestion. No one reacts. Moments later, you circle back, like I was saying earlier. And just like that, the energy has shifted. You're not contributing now. You're correcting. And that shift, though subtle, changes how people perceive you. You've gone from offering wisdom to requesting attention. And that transition, whether spoken or silent, is where your power fades. Machiavelli would see this as a failure of posture. In The Prince, he advises that great leaders must speak carefully, not frequently. Their words are deliberate. Their presence does not beg. He would say it once, and let the silence do the rest. Because silence, when held with calm, is never weakness. It's a test of who notices. Toni Morrison understood this. In interviews, when asked reductive or ignorant questions, she rarely repeated herself. She answered once clearly. And if the questioner didn't get it, she let them sit with their confusion. That silence wasn't distance. It was dignity. To practice this, you must become strong enough to speak without craving response. Say what is necessary, then stop. If the room doesn't respond, don't fill the air. Don't chase what isn't being offered. Let your words float and fall without chasing their reception. Because sometimes the most respected voices are the ones that speak once, then disappear into quiet. Seneca reminds us, associate with people who are likely to improve you. And if your environment doesn't respond to depth, then speaking louder won't save you. It only tells the room that your confidence is conditional. So next time you're ignored, pause. Don't repeat. Don't perform. Let it pass. Let your silence say, "You had one chance to hear me. I'm not repeating myself just to earn your respect." Because the one who can speak once and then let go reveals a deeper mastery, and in a world obsessed with echo, those who don't repeat themselves are the ones we remember. Number 8, seeking validation through eye contact. Most people don't realize how much they're saying. Without saying a word, they glance around the room mid-sentence, searching for a nod. They speak and immediately scan for a smile. Their eyes are not present, they're performing, looking for permission, and that tells us something vital. They don't fully believe their presence is enough on its own. The Stoics warned against this dependence on the external. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." When your gaze is always searching for affirmation, you're no longer centered, you've become a mirror, reflecting others instead of embodying yourself. This habit rarely begins with bad intention. It often comes from politeness, empathy, a desire to connect. But over time, it becomes a trap. You start to need that nod. You wait for that smirk, and your voice loses clarity the moment your eyes start asking, "Am I enough without your reaction?" When you rely on others' expressions to validate your value, you create a subtle but deep imbalance. You put your confidence in someone else's hands, and the moment someone realizes that, they gain quiet power over you. They can withhold a smile, break eye contact, look away, and without saying a word, they shrink your sense of self. Stoicism aims to sever that cord, Epictetus said. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And what is more outside your control than the shifting gaze of another person? Their approval is not your anchor. Your presence must come from within. Now let's ground this in the real world. You're giving a presentation, one person isn't nodding, they're unreadable. You lock onto them, trying to win their reaction. But now you're no longer leading. You're chasing. Your authority begins to dissolve. Not because of your words, but because of your eyes. Now picture the opposite. A speaker whose gaze isn't searching, it's resting, it's not confrontational, it's not needy, it's still. They speak and hold eye contact with calm presence, not demand. They don't scan the room. They don't plead silently for approval. They already know who they are, and their eyes confirm it. This was the essence of Jiddu Krishnamurti. He spoke with a presence so anchored, so complete, that even when he looked directly at someone, it didn't feel invasive. It felt sovereign. His gaze didn't seek agreement. It revealed clarity. He didn't ask for you to see him. He stood as someone already seen. Machiavelli would call this frame control. In The Prince, he emphasized that one must never appear desperate, not even for loyalty. Desperation in the eyes is louder than in words, but a calm, unwavering gaze? That creates psychological gravity. It invites respect without demand. So train yourself to stop searching. When you speak, let your gaze land without wandering. Let it stay without questioning. Let it settle into presence. Because when your eyes stop asking for permission, your energy starts commanding space. And in the end, people don't follow the one who needs their attention. They follow the one who doesn't flinch when no one gives it. And maybe the ultimate test of presence is this. Can you speak, hold your gaze, and still feel whole, even when no one looks back? The most dangerous loss of respect isn't loud, it's silent. It happens in the way you overexplain, apologize for existing, repeat yourself when ignored, or glance around hoping someone will validate you. These are the small leaks of power that turn clarity into confusion, presence into performance. But here's the truth. You don't need to be louder to be respected. You need to be clearer, still, unshaken. And that begins by noticing what you're doing when no one's watching. If this video woke something up in you, something quiet but serious, make sure to subscribe, share, and stay connected. Because respect isn't claimed by words, it's earned through restraint. Your presence is enough, but only if you stop asking others to confirm it.